This is Thomas H. Wolfe in Washington. An atmosphere of calm determination prevails today throughout the United States and reportedly throughout all the nations of the Western Hemisphere as the United States begins to make effective a quarantine to prevent the delivery to Cuba of any further offensive military equipment from the Soviet Union. In an emergency meeting, the Council of the Organization of American States voted 19-0 in support of a 3-point resolution. Point number 1 calls for the immediate dismantling and withdrawal from Cuba of all missiles and all other weapons with offensive capabilities. Point number 2 calls on the members of the Organization of American States to take all measures, including the use of armed force, to enforce the quarantine. And point number 3 decides to inform the Security Council of the United Nations of this resolution in accordance with Article 54 of the Charter of the United Nations. Early reaction from Latin America shows sympathy and support for the firm action of President Kennedy in his announcement to the world on Monday night. Typical of this reaction is an editorial in the Journal of Commerce of Brazil. It says, quote, "With the tranquil courage of the great leaders of democracy, John Fitzgerald Kennedy said to the communist world, enough." In his speech Monday night, Mr. Kennedy clearly spelled out that the United States action was being taken because, as the President phrased it, of, quote, "unmistakable evidence," unquote, that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation in Cuba. Missile sites whose purpose, the President said, quote, "can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere," unquote. Such a threat to the peace and security of the Americas is, as Mr. Kennedy pointed out, in flagrant and deliberate violation of the Rio Pact of 1947. Article 6 of that pact, signed by all of the American republics, including Cuba, states that if the integrity of the territory of any American state should be affected by an aggression which is not an armed attack, the organ of consultation shall immediately meet in order to agree on measures which must be taken for the maintenance of peace and security of the continent. Support for the Rio Pact was immediately forthcoming from the foreign ministries and legislatures of the various American republics. Argentina's foreign minister said that his nation would wholeheartedly honor the Treaty of Rio of Mutual Defense and would side with other continental countries in the fight against communism. It is this fight against the establishment of communist offensive bases in the Western Hemisphere which is at the heart of the United States decision. Mr. Kennedy pointed out that it was Cuba and the Soviet Union who were responsible for the bellicose buildup, and he underlined the fact that the United States wants peace, not war. But he reminded the world that, quote, "the 1930s taught us a clear lesson. Aggressive conduct, if allowed to go unchecked and unchallenged, ultimately leads to war," unquote. Mr. Kennedy emphasized that aggressive actions by the Soviet Union had tremendously increased the threat of war which, of necessity, would lay open all the world to nuclear destruction. And he pointed out that the Soviet government had explicitly and falsely denied these actions. The United States Department of Defense, in proof of the aggressive buildup, showed correspondents photographs of intermediate-range missile sites in Cuba. Officials state that the U.S. knows of 24 Soviet rocket bases in Cuba, with rockets pointed toward the United States and other American republics. Rockets whose range may be as far north as Hudson's Bay in northern Canada and as far south as Lima, Peru. A range, in short, covering almost every American republic. That the United States wants a peaceful solution was emphasized by President Kennedy's direct appeal to Chairman Khrushchev, stating willingness to present the United States proposals for peace, quote, at any time and in any forum, unquote. It is apparent that the American president's action was a calm and deliberate one. It is equally clear that it was not aimed against the people of Cuba, with whom the people of the United States have lived in friendship for over half a century. Indeed, on the contrary, it is evident that the United States wishes for the Cuban people nothing more than the right to achieve the goals of their revolution, goals which Premier Castro has so undeniably subverted. It was this, in part, which President Kennedy had in mind when he stated, quote, our goal is not the victory of might, but the vindication of right, not peace at the expense of freedom, but both peace and freedom here in this hemisphere and, we hope, around the world, unquote. And so the issue is clear. The Soviets can end this crisis by the prompt dismantling and removing of offensive weapons in Cuba. And around the world, men and women today hope that they will do so.